topic, the compassionate servant. Our speaker is obviously a very special person because he is my brother-in-law, which means that he married our sister. Philip and I also have a lot of other things very much in common besides obviously a relative. Philip was born in Amory, Mississippi in 1953. And the very same doctor that delivered him in 1953 was also the very same doctor that delivered to Joe and Dot Williams, a set of twins, in 1957. That doctor was a faithful member of the Lord's church there in Amory. Philip is a very special individual. He attended University of Alabama for a period of time, then went and got an AA degree from Freed-Hardeman College then, and then later on in 1978 got a BA degree in Bible from Freed-Hardeman University. He did youth work in Milan, Tennessee, also worked at Mobile Christian School and taught school there, as well as was the youth minister at the Fairview, Alabama congregation there close to Mobile. Preached at Red Bay Congregation, Red Bay, Alabama, from 1983 to 1988. And since August of 1988, he has blessed and been a part of the Amory, Mississippi congregation, now almost 31 years of working there. Philip is loved and beloved by many of the folks there. Most of the people in the community of Amory know Phillip Hathcock, know his family, know Cindy in regard to the work that she has done as a nurse for 40 plus years there in the community. Of course, their two children are near and dear to us. Elizabeth, who married Dusty Connell, who of course used to worship here years ago. Their two children, Savannah as well as Noah. And then Emily marrying Sean Beck, and they have Sadie Ann and Rigsby. Philip and Cindy went into the farming business just a few months ago, in which they have a hothouse and have started selling produce from that. Fresh, I believe they call it Rise and Shine Produce Farm. Philip's also a beekeeper. He also has chickens there. Very unique individual. I love Philip and appreciate him so very much, not just because of the wonderful way that he's cared for our dear sister all these years, but also the way in the past couple of years that he has cared for our mom and our dad. Philip goes by every morning to check on mom and dad usually and makes mom a cup of coffee, and I greatly appreciate that. That shows the kind of compassion, the kind of love that he has for them. We love and appreciate Philip and Cindy and family. And even though we could not be here in person tonight, I know that he will do a tremendous job with the topic, a compassionate servant. Thank you.
I want to be a worker for the Lord.
I am very happy to be here with you this evening. Appreciate the opportunity. Ron's very generous and very kind in the remarks he had to make. Ron and Don and Cindy, they are from a very fine family. You know Brother and Sister Williams. Brother Williams' father was a preacher, and they are very hard-working, good people. My father was also a preacher, and I tell the young people sometimes, my mother and father picked my wife out for me. You know, that doesn't always work very well. But I had a very fine mother and father. They were both deceased now. And I was a child that listened. I was not a rebellious child. And I thought, well, after they came home talking about her, because they had not seen the Williams much for, I guess, 20 years or more, and after leaving from Amory. But I thought, well, I'll wait and see. And I was happy with what I saw. So of course, Cindy's been a great, great blessing to my life, raised in a preacher's home, and preacher's families is a little bit different from other families, you can imagine, but she knows as much about it as I do, and she's great help to me, and I'm glad that she's with me tonight. She is a nurse, and she retired April the 1st, and we had talked, I'll tell you this just very quickly, we sometimes talk things over too long, but we talked, I guess, for 10 years about getting a hothouse. And so we decided, well, we got one in October. We have 4 grandchildren, as he mentioned. And we decided to grow tomatoes. And she's the main one. I'm helper, but she's the main grower. We have flowers and we have bees, and we've always loved flowers from families that love flowers and gardened, and we've been gardening for many, I guess 50 years nearly. But anyway, she's got 200 tomato plants. We're helping her and the grandchildren. And we got about 500 tomatoes in our kitchen floor right now. And she plans when she gets back Friday, she's going to the farmer's market and going to sell them. And got 100 pepper plants and 30 or 40 squash plants. So we're doing that. I'm still working with the church. And I hope to continue to work. My daddy worked till he was 82 with that. And Brother Williams worked till he was about 80. Almost 86, he was still not in the pulpit, but he was still working with the church. That's not what we're here to talk about. When we talk about being a compassionate servant, what we need to look at to know how to do that is the Lord Jesus Christ. 1 Corinthians 11 verse 1 says, He is our example. He's our perfect example. And so we look at the life of Christ and what He did, and that should help us if we really want to be a Christian that serves God in an acceptable manner, that He will accept and save us in the great day. That's where we need to look. So tonight I've entitled this, The Compassion of Christ. We're going to have our main text in John chapter 8, if you want to look in your Bibles, verses 1 through 11. And when we get to that, you will recognize very quickly what that's all about. Now, the next thing we'll go to here is this. We want to take a minute and take a definition, look at a definition for compassion, and be sure we understand. I would suppose we all do, but there are several things that have to do with compassion. The word compassion means a person that's kind, a person that's good, a person that's gracious. It also has reference to showing kindness to someone that is inferior to us. Inferior in maybe knowledge, wisdom. Inferior maybe in some other kind of status, economic status, if you want to mention education. But listen, people are educated in all different kinds of ways. We had a man there with us, he's passed on now, who was a cattle raiser. Had to drop out of school. I can't remember if he told me in the 3rd grade or 6th grade. And I'd got him a Bible one time. I was sitting at his kitchen table, and he was saying, he was sorry he had stopped to go to work. He was in the Depression era, and he had to help his father. And he wasn't able to read so well and all that. And I told him, I said, listen, Brother Rufus, it didn't matter any time you went out to his place, he had cattle. If any of you know anything about cattle, they always had a sheen on them, summer or winter, the hair. His pastures were always lush. I said, listen, you got a PhD in raising cattle, okay? But now sometimes people get carried away with that education thing. Now I got some good education, had to be a preacher. But people who do all kinds of jobs are educated people and know what they do. And we should always be mindful of that and charitable of that. But now, this word compassion especially has reference to being kind to somebody that might be in some way inferior to us. Then also, you notice, it's the word also tender-hearted. Tender-hearted is compassionate. And then we see the word pitiful. Sometimes I can't recall the verse right this minute, but it talks about pitiful. And that's, you might get the idea in reading the verse that he's saying that we're pitiful. The word pitiful means a person of good-heartedness. They are a good-hearted person. It doesn't mean that they are to be pitied. They are people that show pity upon others. Well, that's a word that's associated with compassion, good-heartedness. Now, the next thing we would notice here, three things we'll look at about Jesus tonight, and then we'll also look at some of his teaching at the very end, just a few minutes of his teaching. We want to see about his compassion for people who had need, physical needs. We'll look at his compassion for those who were in sin, and then his compassion just for mankind in general. Now then, the next thing we'll talk about is compassion for those in need. In Acts chapter 10, verse 38 says, Jesus went about doing good. Everywhere he went about doing good. Now that's our great example. Everywhere we go, we ought to really work on ourselves to just try to be doing good to people, doing good. When we leave people, most of the time we would surely hope that they would think, well, it was good while I was around them. And when it's not that way for us, we need to do better, you know. Also, Matthew chapter 19, verse 14 through 15, talks about how he was kind to children. On this occasion, there were parents that were bringing their little children to Jesus, and they wanted him to lay his hands on them, to touch those little children and pray for them. And you recall that the apostles were trying to rebuke them and send them away, and Jesus said, no, no, no. You suffer the little children, come unto me, for such is the kingdom of heaven. And I thought every time I read that verse, of course, Cindy and I have two daughters, Elizabeth and Emily, and then we have the 4 grandchildren. And I think all good parents, it would have been so wonderful if we could have taken our children to Jesus and let him put his hands on them, wouldn't it? Wouldn't that be great? For him to pray for our children. Wouldn't that be the greatest thing? Jesus did that. Then we look at Matthew chapter 14, verse 14, how he fed the multitude. This was the occasion where he fed the 5,000 men plus the women and the children. And the reason he fed them, you know, it's not like it is now for us in this day and time. After he'd been teaching to those people that day and they're going to have to go somewhere, there was not a place for them to stop and get something to eat. They might not have had money. A lot of those people were poor people. They wouldn't have had money. If there had been a place, they wouldn't have had anything to buy it with. And that's where the little boy was. The 5 loaves, 2 fishes. And the apostles wanted to send them away, but Jesus did not want to send them away because he was concerned that they might faint along the way, pass out. He cared about people. And that great miracle was performed. We ought to care about people. Well, the next thing, I'd like for us to look at some of the ways that Jesus was compassionate to those people who are in need. The next slide, please. First of all, you'll notice here, Matthew chapter 8, verse 1, he heals a leper. Leprosy is one of the most horrible diseases that a person could possibly have. It's one of the most horrible things I've ever heard of. The flesh literally rots off the bones. And many times they're going to have bones that are exposed and break before they die, depending on where the leprosy is, if it's in their hands or their feet. But it was also such an embarrassing thing for the family. And in those days and time, the first century before that, if they had leprosy, they had to walk about and stay away from everybody. And if somebody started walking toward them, they had to shout out, unclean, unclean. You think about the stigma, besides the pain, the suffering, all the things they could not engage in life. They couldn't go anywhere with a crowd. They couldn't go see something in their day and time, partake of some type of a public activity. They had to stay away from all those things or stay way back. So when Jesus saw this man, he healed him. You see what good-heartedness Jesus had? I know we can't heal anybody, but we can be concerned and kind and helpful to people who are in dire need because of something of a physical nature. There in Mark chapter 5, verse 1, he healed the man of Gadara. We talk about him, the wild man of the Gadarenes. This man had a devil in him. It was called Legion. You can read that for yourself later. And the reason it was called Legion because there was many of them. And this man was not able to be kept in irons and chains. He'd break them. He didn't have any clothes on. You just think about the embarrassment. He couldn't help that. He would run around the tombs at night, and he would cut himself, and he would scream and holler, and people were afraid of him. Terrible, terrible situation. How would you like to have a child in a situation like that? A son, a brother. What if that happened to your father? I don't know if the man was married or not, but it was a horrible situation. Jesus came. When he came there, that devil in that man knew who he was and started talking ugly to Jesus. Well, Jesus wound up taking that devil and all of them out of that and put him into that herd of swine. You remember 2,000 swine? He ran off and drowned. Think about how compassionate Jesus was to that poor man. What a horrible situation he was in. Look at the next one here. Luke chapter 8, verse 43. Here's a woman, ladies, who had some type of female problem. 12 years she was hemorrhaging. She had used up all of her living trying to see physicians, doctors to be healed, and they couldn't help her. Now, you ladies would know this, and you husbands of the good women would know when a woman is hemorrhaging, and that's taking place all the time, she sometimes could be embarrassed. She's got to be real careful where she's going, what she's doing. 12 years. You remember, she's the one that touched his garment. I hate to drink in front of you, but I have a little dry mouth. I saw that thing about thirsty if you got water. We can't all drink out of this one, but I'd let you go as long as you want to if you didn't mind drinking after me. I've taken a little medicine for a thyroid problem. I didn't know I had it till I had it all last year. And please excuse me. It's funny. The main time it gets dry is when I'm trying to speak. 12 years, this woman had this problem. To be sick with anything that long, it's bad to be sick. I know some people are sick many years with lots of things, but hemorrhaging and all the problems. And when she touched him, Jesus felt the virtue go out of him. You know, he turned around and talked to her, and she came and she admitted it, and he healed her. Another one here is Mark chapter 5, verse 22, Jairus' daughter. Jairus was a ruler of the Pharisees, and his little girl was sick. He came to Jesus, fell down before him, humbled himself, and asked him if he would come and see about his daughter, little girl, 12 years old. And Jesus was on the way to see about this little girl when the lady here that had the hemorrhage touched him. Well, after that situation was rectified there with the lady and she was healed, then they go on to the house, and they're almost to Jairus' house. He was a ruler in a synagogue. Someone says, your little daughter is dead. You just don't trouble the master anymore. Jesus went on, got there, and there was a crowd of people, and they were crying. And, of course, he told me, he said, she's not dead. You know why Jesus did that. He's going to show them she was dead. Had he not said that and gone and healed her, someone would have said, well, she wasn't really dead, you know. Well, she was dead. He said she wasn't, knowing she was, and they laughed him to scorn. He went in and healed the child. It's awful to lose a child. Some of you may, I don't know you all that well at all, but some of you may have lost a child in some way or other, and you would know how terrible it would be. Most of us hope we never see that. We talk about from time to time, parents ought to die before the children. You understand? Well, here's another situation here. In Luke chapter 9:37, he healed the boy of epilepsy. When I was a child, I am 66 years old, there were still people thinking, and there may be some thinking today, that epilepsy is the disease that you could catch. It's not. It's scar tissue on the brain. But when that scar tissue runs a certain place across the brain, they have a seizure. And you know, it's better now, I think, than it was years ago. And sometimes years ago, a person had a seizure, people just kind of get real, you know, we learn more and more. We know what it is. But they were afraid they might swallow their tongue, suffocate themselves. They can't really swallow their tongue, but hurt themselves. Well, this is terrible. This boy would fall down, cut himself, hurt himself. You imagine it, and if you've had that situation, a child like that, but you know somebody possibly it has, and the child hurting themselves, how horrible that would be. I don't know how long the boy had it. Jesus had compassion. The thing we need to learn from all these things is how his heart was involved in it. We can't heal people, but we can have a heart of concern for people, can't we? And then we can do what we can physically. Well, he healed that little boy. Then in Mark chapter 7, verse 31, he healed the deaf and dumb man. It would be terrible to be deaf and dumb. Dangerous, not being able to hear, not being able to speak. I worked in Birmingham for a couple of years when Cindy was going to UAB, finishing the nursing degree, and I worked at a big plant called Stockholm Valves and Fittings where they made big valves and fittings up as big as oil lines, 120 inches. They had several people there that were deaf and dumb. Now, when I say dumb, they They could make a noise, but they really couldn't talk. And one night in the plant, there's one of these fellows, he was running some kind of machine, and he got his arm caught in the machine, and he was standing there hollering, just like that, making all these sounds. Of course, there's all kind of sounds. It has 2,000 workers in this big plant, machines going everywhere, but somebody finally heard him, got back there to him, finally, and then he had to run the machine through another cycle to get his arm out, broke his shoulder. See, it'd be sad to be in a situation like that. The next case here, but Jesus healed that man. There was the man that was blind, Bartimaeus, Luke 18:35. I think it's bad to be able not be able to hear or talk, but it seems like to me it might be worse to be blind. Think how dangerous it is to be blind. I broke a toenail a few years ago. Thought I broke my toe walking through the house at night. Quit doing that, turn the lights on now. Walking through there and caught a chair and turned that great toenail straight up. I don't want to tell you the rest of that story. It's not a good one anyway. But to be blind. Put your house shoes on tonight and be real careful. If you got your husband or wife, give them to hold your hand and just shut your eyes and turn the lights off, start walking through the house and see how you, and they'll tell you if you're fixing to run into something, but be terrible to be blind. How hard it'd be to get through life. Man, we live in a little town, which I'm glad. This is a great town, great city. It'd be hard to get around through Huntsville blind, wouldn't it, without help? Jesus understood. He's acting out of understanding and good-heartedness, love for people. Then we got the fellow here, the woman, Luke 13, verse 11. I guess she had a severe case of osteoporosis. There's a lady in our congregation. She's in a nursing home now. She's stooped terribly bad. And I mean, you think how hard it would be if all the time you have to walk like this, all the time. Talk to somebody, trying to look. How hard be on you. No rest. All the things you could not do, young people. Jesus saw that lady. She'd been that way. How many years? 18 years. And he healed her. And then the lame man. I think he was lame for 30 years. How bad it would be not to be able to walk. Have to crawl. Not be able to walk. These are just cases that show how Jesus had compassion on people. Let's go to the next slide, please. Well, he had compassion for sinners, which we all are sinners. And we're thankful that Jesus does have compassion upon us. We wish we were perfect. We wish we never said or did anything bad, hurt anybody's feelings in any way, but we do. Well, this is another great aspect of compassion is mercy. Mercy and compassion go together. Now, we need to be sure we get in on that business of showing compassion because you know what? If we're going to receive mercy, what did Jesus say? If we do not show mercy, we're not going to receive mercy. And specifically, where is he talking about that? At the judgment day, the judgment scene. Boy, we're going to want mercy and judgment. Don't you know we're going to want mercy, mercy, mercy. Well, the word for compassion is translated mercies in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 3. And notice what the Apostle Paul writes for inspiration. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and the God of all comfort. Mercy. Next slide, please. Now, his compassion for sinners. I want us to look at John chapter 8, verses 1 through 11 for the rest of this time now. I want to read it for you very quickly and then I want to comment on it. John chapter 8, verse 1. Jesus went unto the Mount of Olives. And early in the morning he came again into the temple, and all the people came unto him, and he sat down and taught them. And the scribes and Pharisees brought unto him a woman taken in adultery. And when they had set her in the midst, they said unto him, Master, this woman was taken in adultery, in the very act. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. But what sayest thou? This they said, tempting him, that they might have to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down and with his finger wrote on the ground as though he heard them not. The only case we know of Jesus ever writing anything, this is it right here. Now, so when they continued asking him, he lifted up himself and said unto them, He that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her. That's a very misunderstood verse right there. We want to talk about that just a minute. And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. And they which heard it, being convicted by their own conscience, went out one by one, beginning at the eldest, even unto the last, and Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. When Jesus had lifted up himself and saw none but the woman, he said unto her, Woman, where are those thine accusers? Hath no man condemned thee? She said, No man, Lord. And Jesus said unto her, Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. Now, let's look at these verses. Verse 3. The scribes and the Pharisees are they're probably dragging this poor woman. Now, I'm not in any way condoning any kind of sin, and Jesus didn't either here. But they're dragging this woman probably. Dragging her there. She's been taken in the act of adultery. They're dragging her by force. They force her in her shame to stand in the midst of all these people. This is in the temple. People all around, men and women, to stand there in the middle of them. I don't know how she was dressed or undressed. I have no idea. The Bible doesn't comment on that. But she has to stand in the middle of them, and she's probably trembling. I mean, I think I would be very concerned, and I think I might be shaking or trembling if somebody was fixing to kill me. But she's probably trembling. She's believing they're going to stone her, and that's a horrible way to kill somebody. Now, I'm not in any way objecting to anything or trying in any way to go against anything that God said, and that's something that God had as a type of punishment for death, for committing certain crimes. But you got to admit, it's a terrible way to die. People throwing big rocks and stones at you, hitting you in the head, and finally you fall down, and they just knocking the life out of you with rocks and stones. Might have knocked an eye out before they were dead. Knocking teeth out. She's standing there. Verse 4. They say she was taken in the act of adultery. This woman has no excuse whatsoever. That's the law. They have properly quoted to Jesus the law of Moses, and that's the law they're living under. That's the law Jesus lived and died under. She's got no excuse. She's guilty. But I always think about this. Where is the man? They caught her in the act. Where's the man? Now, see, there's something wrong to start with right there. And Jesus knows what's going on. If they caught her in the act, why didn't they bring the man? He's guilty. Let's look at the next slide. Then in verse 5, they cite the law of Moses. They tell him, Moses said you must stone this person to death that's caught in this act. They had to have a witness, so one of those guys, he's going to be the witness. And after he makes the statement, he's already made it, they're supposed to kill her. So, verse 6 says they were tempting Christ. And what they were doing here, the Romans were in charge there at that day and time, and the Romans didn't consider adultery an offense to be punishable by death. So if he says, yes, stone her, he's going to get in trouble with the Romans. But the law of Moses said to stone her. If he says no, then the people are going to get mad at him. So see, they're always trying to trick him, but they never did. He's God. He's the Son of God. And as we go through this, you just think about it. Those folks are right over there now in the other world, and I believe they wish they'd have done something different. I know they wish they'd done something different. I want to come back just 1 minute, please. So they're tempting him. This clearly is a capital offense, punishable by death. Jesus knew what they were doing, and he turned his back, and he was displeased with him. He knows that they are guilty of this. So the next slide now. In this verse 7 and 8, they continued asking him. They said, what are you going to do about it? You know how it is when somebody gets in your face about something. Well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do about it? We told you that. What are you going to do? That's what they're doing. Jesus stoops down. He's calm. They're probably getting a little excited. People all around. Could have been some of those people standing on the outside out there in that crowd and saying, yeah, what are you going to do about it? Helping these guys out. Poor woman. I'm not trying to condone her sin, but poor woman. And my brethren, anytime anybody is caught in something bad, we ought to pity them. I mean it. It could be us, it could be our child. If we're very mature as Christians and we're really thinking, we ought to pity people about that. We ought not ever rejoice or be happy about anybody being in trouble. I can't help how bad they are. Now, he stands and says, he who is without sin, let him cast the first stone. That has been so misused, and you hear it about different things. Listen, that is not a general statement for all time about everything. Those men were guilty of the sin of adultery themselves. And Jesus knew it. He able to know lives. He's able to know minds. He said, which one of you has not done this? You throw the first stone. Well, he stoops back down. They start dropping their stones. They knew that he was telling the truth. They knew the law. Now, the Bible says they started walking out, the oldest down to the youngest. The oldest man that was there, whoever what he knew what was going on. He knew they were trying to trick Jesus. They took this poor woman. They probably paid the man off. You reckon, Brother Dozier, they paid that man off somewhere? I don't know. They might have paid that man off and said, look, we're going to take care of you. We're going to kill this poor woman. How must this woman have felt? We ought to try to empathize. Can we even begin to put ourselves in the sort of, well, I've never committed adultery. Well, I hadn't either. I'm not talking about that. But how would you feel being put in a situation where people are wanting to put you to death and kill you and ready to kill you in a horrible way? How would you feel? We've got to think about people. Everybody's got feelings. Little children got feelings. Older people got feelings. Everybody's got feelings. Jesus understood that. He wants us to understand that. That's what compassion is about. Feelings. It's about real things that really matter. Well, I asked myself, were they going to give this woman a chance to repent before they sent her soul into eternity? Were they going to let her repent? I don't know. I get the strong impression they weren't going to. They didn't have any mercy. I don't think they were going to have any mercy. And I don't think they're going to get any mercy. Let's look at the next slide. Well, next verse here says this, or next slide. This is a great illustration, the greatest illustration I know of judgment and mercy. Judgment and mercy. Now, we need to think about us standing before Jesus. I don't know if we'd be standing. I feel like we'd probably be down some way. I don't know. But us before Jesus. We know we haven't been perfect. I think you must be good people. That's why you're here tonight. Good Christian people. I think that's why you're here. But I'd hate to have to say it, but I'd say that you sweetest little oldest ladies, I don't know what you've done. I don't want to know what you've done, but I feel like you've done something. We've all done something. This hurt the Lord. This is judgment and mercy together, which has received its highest example in the life, the work, and the person of Jesus Christ to show us how it ought to be. The next slide. Now, Jesus had compassion for mankind through his teaching as he brings it down to us. He's trying to have compassion today with us, with our lives. We always talk about our hands, our feet, our mouth. And what does he say in Matthew 7, verse 12? We talk about this as a golden rule. And as ye would that men should do unto you, do ye also unto them likewise. We say, do unto others, you'd have others do unto you. We try to teach our children that. How do we want to be treated? Well, we need to think about it in our dealings with other people. And ever how we want to be treated, as long as it's right. And if somebody says, well, I don't care, they can treat me the way they want to, well, you better be careful. And if that's anybody's attitude here, you better be real careful in case you die tonight. Unprepared to meet the Lord. People who's got good sense, people who are not just, I won't say anything, it might say something not be as nice, but people who've got good sense, good judgment, want to be treated nice, like to be treated kindly, gently. It's just so sad that we've lived in a society nowadays that they seem to forget about gentleness, haven't they? Even you elderly people treating you pretty nice everywhere you go. They hold the door for you. Ladies, men take their hats off anymore when you walk in a room, or do men get up and give you a seat? Young boys, it'd be so great if we had a gentle society. If people really were trying to be nice to other people, boy, it'd be so much better. It was years ago, young people. I'm sorry that in some ways you have to see and hear some of the things. It's not always been like this. Hopefully it's going to get better. I keep hoping it's going to get better. And but we'll see. What about Galatians 6, 9, and 10? This is from God. Verse 9 says, let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint not. If we keep on and don't give up, we're going to be rewarded for being a Christian, for being compassionate. In verse 10, we need to listen to this verse very carefully. As we therefore have opportunity, let us do good unto Christians in the church. Uh-oh, wait a minute. What about these bad people out here? Bad people. We better be careful. Now, we've got to make some judgments. And we don't need to take up sins of other people. But we've got to learn to have compassion on the person and hate the sin, not the person. As we have therefore opportunity, let's do good unto all men, especially the household of faith. You know, there have been a lot of people been won to Christ that were very bad people because some Christian was good to them. Sometimes we fail to think about it and understand, why are some people so bad? Why do they talk the way they talk? Why do they act the way they act? Well, if we knew their parents, that means he's fixing to go ring a bell now, hurry up. Well, if we knew their parents or something like that, and knew how they were raised, maybe we'd know why they act the way they act. Some people from children have been treated like animals or worse. Knocked around, banged around, cursed, kicked around, starved at times. I knew about one father, he'd go and he'd pull in some place and he'd get him a thing of ice cream, not ask the family anything, just drive off. He'd eat it and didn't get the children any. He called himself a Christian. We need to try to stop and think about why some people might be as bad as they are. I've had some people that I would be pretty sure on several different occasions that they lived a pretty wicked life, but they were very nice to me, and I tried to be very nice back to them. I think that's what the Lord wants me to do. Condone them in their sin? Oh, no. But just be decent to them. Maybe I'm the only one ever be decent to them. Maybe that'll do something for them. And maybe then I get to talk to them about their soul. You reckon? Look at the next one there. In conclusion, brethren, will we extend mercy to people? Because we want mercy and because God says to do it. That's the main reason. God says to do it. It's the example of Jesus. Remember 1 Corinthians 11:1, our perfect example. We do it for those who are in need. There are a lot of people in need. They're sick. They've got different kinds of problems. They're in terrible situations. Will we try to do nice things for them? What about those in sin? Will we try to help them? Instead of writing them off and say, yeah, I know where you're going, just what you deserve. Well, that's not a way to be. Would we try to help them, encourage them, at least live right in front of them, act right in front of them, do right to them as we're dealing with them? Would we do that? Could we do that much? I don't know why we couldn't. Sometimes people don't want to get their hands dirty, though, you know. And then, will we receive compassion and mercy? Tonight, before we have this invitation, each one of us ought to be thinking, now, is my life such that Jesus is going to extend mercy to me? Is he? Am I going to get to go to heaven in that great day? And brethren, we will if we trust and obey the Lord. I hope this helps us to have a better understanding of compassion and how we ought to live and what we ought to do and what God expects of us and what would be good for people around us. I hope it is some good for us. Hope the Lord's pleased with it. Hope it'll help all of us to do better. Now, do I need to extend, Brother Brian, the invitation? Wait, you told me wait. I'll wait. All right. Thank you very much for your very kind attention, and I'm very happy to get to be with you this evening.